Welcome to Rev Reads. For the regular standard view of Rev Reads, this review is going to be way different than a normal review. Two reasons. First, this is live, and I normally, really script out all the stuff I'm going to do and have everything, planned out pretty succinctly because there's way too much to say about a single book to cram it into 10 minutes. So in order to do that, I need to really prepare what I'm going to say in advance. And I haven't made that amount of preparation for this video. Second, the reason this is live is because I'm talking about a book that I couldn't finish. And I read my books all the way from beginning to end. I finish them, and I'm always one of the things I'm thrilled about is I'm reviewing books that I've read all the way from beginning to end. And I have a book here that I could not complete. Not even come close to completing it. I just could not finish it all the way through, and I'm making this live review so that I can put the book behind me. And that's the book Shepherds for Sale by Megan Basham. How evangelical leaders traded the truth for a leftist agenda. So I want to start off by saying I totally am in Megan's camp. When I first saw this book, super excited about it, immediately went out and contacted Broadside Books and requested a review copy. I'm like, this is going to be awesome. Because just to tell you just about me for a moment, I'm a conservative pastor. I believe in inerrancy. I believe the Bible is perfectly right about everything, and the Bible is our guide for what is love, what is justice, what is righteousness. And I pastor a small church in the New Orleans area, and I am unbelievably frustrated at times from pastors who I believe are selling out. And I think it's selling out to the left and the right of political camps. I do not like it when pastors are getting totally involved in getting a specific candidate voted into office or his policies being brought to bear. My role as a pastor is to proclaim the word of God, to teach people about the word of God, to tell people about Jesus Christ. And I want to be involved in politics as little as possible, because I think a role of a pastor is supposed to be, if times are awful in politics, we're here to comfort our people. If times are wonderful in politics, we're here to encourage our people in those times. So we kind of need to be above the fray, so that no matter what's going on around us, we can speak God's truth to God's people. So I don't like it that pastors, and I feel like I've seen this. I've been having this leftward drift where any impassioned cause by, I'm just going to come out and say, because of how I feel about it, have what I would say would be Marxist, communist type views, which are anti-God, anti-family, that they're taking up the causes in that movement. And it really disheartens me and frustrates me. And so part of the reason I was hoping to get out of this book is like a warning for keeping me out of that leftward drift, help in doing that as well. And so I was really excited to read this. And as I'm getting into it, I've realized, just after reading the introduction, first chapter, just about done with the second chapter, I cannot, in honesty and in a good spirit and mental capacity, finish the book. I can't finish the book because while I agree with Megan's overall premise of the leftward drift, I find her tactics to be deceptive. And the amount of time that it would take me to check her work to see where she is accurate and where she is putting words into people's mouths, I don't have that time. I can't do it. So I would need to read this book trusting that what Megan was saying about these individuals is correct, and I do not believe I can do that. The reason is that this book contains multiple, and Gavin Ortlund brought this out in his review of, or his problems with the book, and Neil Shenvi brought this up as well, is that there's multiple places in the book, I shouldn't say multiple, lots of places in the book where Megan, instead of having a full like 2, 3 sentence quotation, a paragraph quote, she gives you 2 words in quotations, 3 words in quotations. And then the rest of the sentence is her writing. So I have an example here for you. I'll put it onto the screen. We read in the book, when the 11th commandment has met in practice, and the 11th commandment is thou shalt not criticize the pastor. When the 11th commandment has been met in practice, is that even as prominent pastors and theologians have spent the last few years accommodating every sort of secular progressive influence, critical or even cautioning voices have been slow to respond. When they do respond, leaders like J.D. Greear, then president of the Southern Baptist Convention, have wielded the 11th commandment like a rocket launcher, firing descriptors like divisive and demonic at any who raise objections to the promotion of critical race theory, feminism, or LGBT ideology in SBC ministries. Greer went on to liken those leaving churches over woke teaching to a synagogue of Satan. So if you'll notice here, what is in quotations are the words divisive and demonic. And nothing else in that sentence is in quotations. Critical race theory is not, feminism is not, LGBT ideology is not. So I went myself back to the article that's referenced in here. Neil pointed me to the link for it, thankfully. Neil Shenvi did, so I didn't need to look it up myself, and read through the whole article. It says nothing about feminism in it at all. And so including that in there, it's like, yeah, that's not in the article. So then I'm like, well, maybe it's talked about in the sermon. So I end up watching the sermon that article is about. And in that sermon, J.D. Greear does say some questionable things about critical race theory where I'm like, oh, I wish you hadn't said that. We need to come out as more stronger against the injustice of Marxism that I believe critical race theories bring about. And it's something that we should not be having these conversations about. We should be speaking that it is clearly biblical injustice that's brought out by critical race theory. And I'm going to guess that J.D. Greear and I probably have strong disagreements about the nature of critical race theory. If you want to learn more about critical race theory, you can read Neil Shenvi's book, Critical Dilemma, which I have behind me here on the bookshelf. A great book that really takes down critical race theory as being an option for the church when it comes to justice. But so he says some bad things about critical race theory. I find nothing about feminism in it. And then in the sermon, not only does J.D. Greear not say you are divisive and demonic if you oppose the promotion of LGBTQ ideology, but in the sermon, he clearly and without apology, as strongly as I would, talks about how homosexuality is a sin and talks about how he has been persecuted from local atheists, local people in the LGBTQ community because of his stance in favor of godly marriage and godly sexuality. So he is as explicit as a person could be that LGBTQ issues are a sin and they don't belong in the Southern Baptist Convention. That's what he says in the sermon that's what he says in the sermon that this quotation is referencing. He is not in this quotation calling people divisive and demonic if they raise objections against the promotion of LGBTQ ideology. In fact, he would be saying that he is divisive and demonic himself. He's not saying that. And so it's just, this is not true. It's wrong. Like this is straight out falsehood. And I watched Gavin Ortland's video about climate change, and he also brings up a couple of places where Megan, in her section on Gavin, she uses these 2-3 word quotes. And if you look at him in context, those quotes are not saying what Megan claims in her book. Like not even close to what Megan is claiming he's saying through them in the book. She's putting words into his mouth. And she has these kind of quotations throughout the book. And it drives me insane because I know now If I see these 1 or 2 word quotes in the midst of a sentence that is all the rest of her words, I cannot trust that that is an accurate representation of what the person is saying. I'm one of those people where if you're going to quote somebody, I want the paragraph. Like, I want to be able to read the context of what that quote is so that I can see right in the book if you're being legitimate in your quotation. I mean, maybe give me a one sentence quote if like you're quoting somebody favorably and you're like, we're bros, and I can trust that you're not going to take one of your bros out of context. But when you're attacking someone, which let's be honest, this book is all, attacking people for their leftist agenda. You you need to give me the whole quote. Like Megan Basham's whole, one of her things is I have the receipts. Well, the receipts should be in the book. You should have the full quotes in there, and you don't. And I'm sorry, there's probably 5 or 6 times I looked up those partial quotes, and 3 of them were just not correct. She was putting words into people's mouths that they didn't say. And here's the hard thing about this book, though, is I read the full section on Gavin Ortland's YouTube video on global warming. And in totality, I think she's totally right. I watched Ortland's video on global warming, and Ortland, bless his heart, he has a few quotes where he's like, "Oh, we should agree to disagree. We're just here to have good conversations." And it's like, "Yeah, that's so great that you say that, but I don't know how you can watch his video if you believe global warming is not a real problem. That like if we want to be good caretakers of this environment, global warming should not be our concern." If you fall under that category, I don't know how you can watch Gavin's video and not view Gavin as saying the only reason you have this view is because you are ideologically driven by politics and you haven't investigated the information. That's the only way I can take that video. To me, it is an entirely biased video. And the times where Gavin's talking about just wanting to have a good conversation, like, no, you're not interested in that. You're not. If you were, you would spend time talking about both sides, talking about why it is that your brothers and sisters in Christ believe that global warming isn't a concern. Maybe have a conversation with an expert who talks about why it isn't a major concern that we should worry about. Like, I just came back from Burundi in East Africa, which is the poorest nation in East Africa. And actually, on the plane ride back, I was thinking about climate change and all the issues with that. And it actually made me a little angry because I'm like, there are easy to solve problems on the ground in Burundi, where if you had one of these climate change institutions that were collecting millions of dollars, if they had poured their resources into cleaning up the air in Burundi and helping with some very basic environmental caretaking issues, they could change that country for the betterment. But instead, we're wasting our money on global warming, which I don't think is doing a lot to help anyone. And so I think Megan's right in her overall criticism on Gavin. But then when she has these 1 or 2 word quotes, it allows Gavin to be like, "You're taking me out of context. I never meant to say those things." Because then I think any honest person would be like, yeah, in that moment, she took him out of context. When I really wanted this book because, I'm reading all the things about how Megan Basham will have her receipts, that she was going to steel man the arguments of the pastors who have gone left. She was going to show without a doubt that they are going in that leftward drift. And I don't think she makes her case as thoroughly as is brought out in this book. And I think the only way I could read this book and feel good about what I took away from it is if I took the time to look up every single citation. And when some of her citations are 1 or 2 words in quotations in the midst of a 40-minute YouTube video, hour-long sermon, I don't have time to do that. I don't think many people, unless you have a YouTube channel or a blog or something that is dedicated to this kind of stuff and that's your job, I don't think many people have time to dedicate to do that. I'm a pastor who has a time to read through this book and for the most part trust that the citations will be accurate and honest. And I can't do that with Megan Basham's book. So for that reason, I can't read it. And so this review is more to say, because of the time that I put into reading books and reading lots of books and reviewing lots of books, I can't give a full review to Megan Basham's book because the way she cites people is done in such a way that even if I wanted to, I would never have the time to fact check it all to see if it's accurate. And I think this is the kind of book where I think it's kind of important to fact check it to see if what she's saying is really honest. And if the fact checks come out as true, all the more in her favor. But I can't do this. So, I- and this sort of kills me. So I think people could get a lot of good stuff out of this. But I would also say only read this if you have hours upon hours to dedicate to check up all the citations. I don't know many people who would do that. And again, it kills me to say that because I want to recommend this book. I want this to be like, oh, this is one of the books of the year. But I emotionally and mentally cannot continue to read it because every time I come to a new quotation that is only a couple of words long, it it does bad things for me spiritually and mentally because I'm like, oh, I can't trust that this is true, and I want to trust that it is true. So, so yeah, this review was more. Here's why I can't finish Megan Bashan's Shepherds for Sale, and I would love for people to just come along and be like, we need a better version of this, and then for Megan to humble herself and say, yeah, I should quote people better and longer. So I'm going to come out with a superior version of this that can't be critiqued in the way that the current version is. That would be the ideal situation. And I would also love Gavin Ortland to be like, take a step back and be like, yeah, well, she did have some places where she took me out of context, but yeah, the overall tone of my video on YouTube wasn't good. And I should change that. And I think she owes an apology to JD Greer for what she said in that quotation because I do think that that is totally inaccurate based on what she said, what he said in that citation. I think that's a huge error, and so I hope for better. I don't know if I'll get it. As a pastor, I've learned very often to say to people, "I'm wrong," and I didn't do that right and I'll try to do better that time. I say those things all the time because I can be an idiot. I can mess up. I can do things wrong. And so I would like to hope that maybe my tone and my perspective could help bring out some cooler heads in this issue if any of these major players watch this video because I'm not trying to attack Megan. I want her book to be awesome. I want Gavin Ortland to do awesome things. I don't want him to make videos about left leaning climate change and how you're just politically driven if you're not for it. Um, and I don't want JD Greer to support critical race theory. I want him to stand on biblical justice. I probably won't get all the things that I want because none of us do, but that would be my hope. So there's my thoughts on Shepherds for Sale by Megan Basham. This went way longer than my typical video, and so I will shut up now. But if you liked what you saw here, I'd encourage you to check out Rev Reads and subscribe to the channel so that you can be engaged in the wonderful world of Christian literature.